Dear learners, I am Sukant Kumar Mahapatra, academic of sociology. Welcome all of you to NIR Studio. We have Dr. Elena Samantarai, who is a sociologist and works at BBK National Labour Institute. I welcome to our studio.
Thank you, Sukant.
Dear learners, you might have seen that in your home and neighborhood there are women who are always busy in household work, and you might have seen that their men rarely do the household work. And there are many girls and women, they sacrifice their career because they have to be busy in the household work to take care of the children and of their grandparents and in-laws. Now I request our expert to explain what is gender.
Yes, Sukant rightly said. When we see girl children not being given lot of privileges which boys get in their life, it becomes a discriminatory practice which is translated into reality across ages, across time span, and so many years to come we still have to forego such practices. When we say the meaning of gender, gender actually does not mean something which is taught from the childhood as an identity.
Yes.
Gender is actually an institutionalized system of practices, and this system of practices actually creates is based on a principle of inequality between men and women, where certain privileges are distributed differentially across between men and women. So gender definitely is, it refers to sociologically, if we have an understanding of gender, it refers to institutionalized system of practices which is based on the principle of inequality, and where different sexes have different life chances and differential access to resources.
So when we are talking about gender, the sex is also coming to the picture as a concept. So I know that gender is a social construct where sex is a biological construct. So can you give more example to explain what is the difference between gender and sex?
True. Gender is definitely a social construct, and many anthropologists in the past, they have like Margaret Mead, they have clearly highlighted on this debate on the difference between gender and sex. A lay person would definitely try to understand gender and sex as are two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
But actually both are extremely different. Sex is something which is biological, and gender is something which is socially constructed in societies.
Yes.
Across cultures, across time spans, and across different regions.
Yes.
So we have a different understanding of gender which is created culturally, socially in different societies. Now when we look at the debate on gender and sex, it is very interesting as a debate because right long time back when anthropologists like Margaret Mead,
yes,
they were talking about this debate on gender and sex, they very clearly highlighted that like Mead was studying 3 primitive communities,
yes,
and she was writing this book Sex and Temperament in 3 Primitive Communities, where she identified 3 tribal communities and saw that in one tribal community both men and women were aggressive, volatile in nature, which is supposed to be which we accept with these traits as something which should be particular to a particular sex.
Yes.
But Mead was the first person as an anthropologist, an American anthropologist, who really tried hard during her field notes and spending so much of time with these with the tribal groups and understanding their cultural patterns. She identified that one group had similar cultural patterns, similar temperaments. Another group she found where women were very fierce, very aggressive, while men were adorning ornaments and sitting inside the household and
yes,
taking care of children. And she came to a conclusion that gender is a social construct. It is created across different societies. And in another tribal community she found where, for example, in her field notes you will see where a child is just the whole idea of caring function, where the child is grabbing a mother's hair and holding to mother's back by grabbing the mother's hair. So Mead tries to understand that caring role which we associate generally with women,
yes,
is not so always in all societies, because in that society she found that the mother did not symbolize or did not portray an image which is the so-called caring image which we attribute to women generally in societies. And so she came to a conclusion that sex and gender are different terms altogether, and the debate on sex and gender goes on. Until now we are very clear about this debate that gender is not something which is biological. It cannot be given to an individual by birth. Gender is something which is very social, which is constructed, and it is actually constructed in different societies in different ways. So it is normalized, it is routinized across societies as different cultural practices.
Yeah. That means you want to say that suppose we can give an example. That means in case of suppose father and mother, it is always that a man cannot have a baby. That means because of biological construct. But when it is come to social construct at gender, suppose a boy is crying, so someone is said that why you are crying like a girl. That means it is social construct in process of socialization or in the process of being a social society. We always carry a kind of belief system in our mind. So that gives a social construct.
True, that is very true. Like it depends upon how we socialize children, and we have been socializing children in a very in a manner which actually reinforces these gendered identities, and we actually socialize children where girl children are often disempowered in the entire process of socialization. Like for example, we see children, we tell girl children that, yes, see, when you have guests at your house, you should go and serve them, and at the same time when we have boys at home, we don't tell them to do the same task. So any kind of activities which is related to household, which is related to household maintenance, all these activities we attribute with women. So we definitely train them to behave accordingly, and all these practices looks very normal actually. Yes. No one questions them, because we always think that this is something which has been transmitted over generations.
So we're discussing now the topic of gender discrimination. So people might have the question, what is gender discrimination?
Yes, I would like to share with learners that they must have experienced gender discrimination in their everyday lives, but they might not be able to identify that this is gender differentiation or gender discrimination, because as I was saying previously, that when we point out at girls or point out at boys to do certain things because they are boys and girls, and we make it look as very normal, they don't identify this is something which is gender differentiation. But when we talk about gender discrimination, this discrimination actually happens at every level. The moment the girl child is born, she is discriminated when it comes to education, and she is not allowed to go for a higher education. She is not allowed for mobility outside the village. If it is a rural girl child, then she is not allowed for mobility for higher education outside the village. And access to resources, when you talk about resources, who would have access? Who will have better access to resources? It is decided by the cultural practices, by the community practices, by the family, by everyone who is
yes,
who is there with the girl child, and who tell them again and again that, see, these are the resources which you have access to, and these are the resources which the boys have access to. For example, a girl would like to go for higher education after primary education because she must have been a very good student, and she could the village might not have a good school, or might not have a higher education institute, for which she needs to go outside the city, outside the village, to pursue her higher education. But at the same time, she will be denied this opportunity, this access, because of the fact that she is born as a girl child, and the same access and opportunity would be given to the boy child, because they would consider education is not very much necessary for a girl child, because girl child is supposed to do domestic duties after all at the end of the life, so they should not have access to resources. So when we see gender discrimination, it gets translated in the life cycle of women actually. From the day they are born till they die, there is denial of access to resources, denial of education, denial of food. Sometimes you must have seen women who might not be taking their food, the first meal of the day, till late in the afternoon, because they have to feed the whole family, and by the time the task is over, it's already mid-afternoon, and they will get a chance to eat once they feed the whole family.
Yeah.
So this is how it gets, these discriminatory practices prevails in the society, and no one questions them.
Yeah, even gender discrimination also operates in case of boys. you know, sometimes boys also become, when they grown up, a parent expect that they should also join the workforce instead of being in the school. So what happens, slowly, there are some boys, those in the tribal areas and those who are also from the low economic bracket, so they are not able to pursue higher education because of these limitations, because they can send their girls to for any kind of job, that means for the factories, for industries. So they expect that their boy children also support them in education. So gender discrimination is not only operates in case of women, sometimes it also operates in the case of boys. And you know, gender discrimination also practices in different social institutions. Can you explain how it operates?
Yes, gender discrimination is prohibited by our constitution, no doubt about that, and we should not practice any kind of discrimination as per our constitutional ethos. But we have gender discrimination, as I was saying, very invisible structures which we do not even realize that they would create gender discrimination, and we think they are very normal in family, in education, in religion, in economy, in political institutions. These are the institutions, different institutions where gender discrimination operates, you can say either manifested directly, or it might operate at a very invisible level, and no one would know that it is gender discrimination. So that is how we see different institutions in the society, how they perpetuate gender discrimination, or how the roots of gender discrimination are actually there in different institutional practices.
Yeah, like gender discrimination, that practices are seen in the family, in the workplace, or in economic institution and political institutions. And a learner, if you see the family, you will find that most of the time, most of the cases, that father is the head of the family, and therefore, and if you see the mother, he is most of the time busy in her kitchen work, household work, and then sometimes whatever decision comes to, we always ask that father, that means whether I should do that or do this or not, and very rarely we ask our mother, that means whether I should do that or not. That means the authority always vested with the father. And if you see the socialization practices from the early age, we say that no, as a girl you do that, you wear that kind of dress, and you do that, you don't do that. That means socialization is also major practices. That means through socialization we learn what to do and what not to do. And that provides ceiling on kind of work where you will be engaged or where you will not engaged. What do you feel?
True. Like in family, if you see the whole idea of gender division of household labor, that if you see very clearly that these practices are so deeply embedded in patriarchal structures in the family that we don't feel very disadvantaged. Girl children don't feel disadvantaged because they feel that these are the practices which they have seen their mothers do. They have always seen their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers doing housework. So they think that this is a woman's job. This is how household division of labor gets very much deeply embedded, and household division of labor, unequal household division of labor gets embedded in household structures, and where patriarchy operates, as you are rightly saying, where male is considered the karta or the head of the family, and all important decisions of the family are taken by the male members of the family. So I would like to tell the learners that when you see such practices, or when you really try to see these practices happening in the household, don't ever feel that these are very normal practices. This is something which you might feel that the culture has trained you to do so, but these are the cultural practices which we are challenging. These are the practices which actually later on gets translated into economic choices, educational choices, skill training, and that is how family perpetuates actually gender inequality in the household. Similarly with socialization practices, when you see socialization practices, we were just discussing that how girl children are disempowered, and how the very idea of their identity, decision making, and all these aspects of their identity formation do not get shaped into reality, because they depend upon the identity which they have been trained by the community members, family members, societal structures to portray as this is my identity. Right from the socialization patterns, we have not seen mothers or grandmothers assert that voice. So that is how family, household division of labor, patriarchal gender relations get deeply embedded, and these invisible structures of patriarchy always operate in minds, in communities, in societies, and neutralize unequal relations. For example, I want to share that in a family you have one boy and one girl as children. And we see that the parents will give the same kind of food to both of them. The parents will buy same dresses to both of them in festivals.
Yes.
No one is denied any opportunity in this way. In terms of food, in terms of clothes, they are just treated equally. They won't even give less quantity to girls. It seems very equal. When we see such families, we feel that, oh, they are they have equality in their mindset. So whatever they give to the boy, they don't at least practice gender discrimination.
Yes.
But at the same time, when the same family sends the boy to a school and tells the girl that you can only be educated up to a particular level, and then you're going to get married, then there operates these structures where the girl, maybe because she's trained and socialized in such practices to say yes, she never raises a voice, and she accepts it as, she never thinks that any community member or any family member has discriminated against her, and she very assertively says that this is what my community members and my parents have designed for me, have thought for me, so I should go by what they have thought for me. So here we see these invisible structures operate, unequal structures operate, where a girl is denied of an opportunity for a higher education, which she might, if she pursues, she might contribute and she might be as a great human resource potential.
So how do you feel religion as a social institution perpetuating gender discrimination?
Yes, religion has got its own practices. I would not say religion exactly creating discriminatory practices. I would rather associate religion with ritual practices. Like if you see every religion, we are a multi-religion, multicultural society, and all of us know that we celebrate all religions, we celebrate all festivals, and we live in this diversity, and we are happy to live in this diversity. But there are certain, in every religion you have certain religious practices, ritual practices, which might associate males and females with these practices. So any society, for example, might have a ritual practice. Maybe, for example, you talk about a tribal religion, and you say that they have certain practices to worship a particular idol or worship a particular force of nature, and women are supposed to do this. They associate women with such kind of practices. So most of the time when these worships are organized, they only invite women, or men are just outside these practices, because men are not supposed to engage in them. Religious practices sometimes take a toll on your energy, time, health, and so many other things. Hill and mountain region women, they do so many ritual practices, and they also climb to the mountains for 8 hours a day. And they are also supposed to, because they are poor, they are supposed to participate in economic activity. So where is the time to do all these activities? When? So this is how we discriminate between people, between different groups like men and women, and associate certain practices with them. Fasting, the whole idea of fasting, religious fasting. You see, any religion would have this notion of fasting, but any religion which associates women with fasting, then the woman would not be physically fit to go to the workplace that day. Men spend less time on ritual practices than women.
As you know, education is an instrument of social equality. That means that we get education, that means we should do something in our life and contribute something meaningful. But when you see in school and colleges, girls are often discriminated on the grounds of dress, or if you look at the textbook and curriculum, we find that most of the time we have example that girls has to do the household work, they have to take care of the children. That means in some way this text always socializes in the way that when we grow up, when we have to take care of children. And similarly, when we become parents, we have the same mindset, and we often say that no, you are a girl, how can you go to colleges, and because you have to take care of your children, you have to get married. So in that way, the textbook has a hidden agenda in that, and we call it this hidden curriculum. And similarly, if you see that when sometimes girls are very brilliant, but we don't send them, because we say that if they will go to colleges, they have to get married after some time, and the dowry is also case. So now our motive should be to provide them equal opportunity as we are providing opportunity to the boys. Now, can we explain more about how economic institutions gender discrimination take place?
In economic institutions, it is very clear, like I was saying earlier, that men do men jobs, women do women jobs.
Yes.
And in India, we see that there is only 27% labor market participation for women. So, and it all depends upon, there are so many reasons to it, why there is the women participation in the labor market is declining, why women are not coming out to work. Lot of the activities which women do in their working age is unpaid activities.
Yes.
And they do, as you were saying rightly, they do domestic duties, they do unpaid household work, they do all activities which are not remunerated, which are not recognized, which are not even counted
Yes.
in the national accounting statistics. So when you see the economic institutions where we have a huge chunk of population who are women and who can contribute so much to the economy if
Yes.
they continue working, but unfortunately over our labor force surveys we see so many years there is a decline in female labor force participation rate, and now we see women are and it is 27%, and now we see the same labor force surveys talk about that in 65% urban women and 62% rural women in the age group of 15 to 59 are participating in domestic duties. So this clearly shows how discrimination is deeply entrenched in these structures and how women do not find it very easy to negotiate with patriarchal structures to go out and go for paid work.
Yes.
Women do not participate in the economy. Women are not encouraged. We would not say they do not. They are encouraged, not encouraged to participate. There is no enough motivating factors for them to participate, and they are into occupationally segregated jobs, which are like gendered jobs. Men doing men jobs, women doing women jobs. Because lack of skills and lack of education, they can only become, they only start their career with a low paying job with no career mobility. And now we have a very strong legislation to regulate this discrimination, the Sexual Harassment Act of 2013. So workplace becomes very important for a woman, and it needs to be, and women need lot of care policies, women need lot of household redistribution of work to participate in economic activities.
Yeah. So dear learners, if you see like economic institution, we have also gender discrimination in the politics. If you see if you go by statistics, you'll find that we have less MPs in the parliament even after 74th Amendment Act. No, we have representation of women in the Panchayat election, but you will see at parliament and the legislative assemblies, their cases are less. So why you feel so, ma'am?
Yeah, women have, that's what I'm saying, women have, even we have such proactive legislations, we have such empowering legislations, there is no denying the fact that the country has really fared well in terms of equality, like we have Equal Remuneration Act, we have these legislations, Maternity Benefit Act, this legislation for political empowerment of women, 73rd and 74th Amendment. We have all these empowering legislations, but it depends a lot on the structures, on the cultural practices, social norms where a woman comes from. Now, for example, you have given a very interesting piece of legislation, a piece of empowerment, a piece of voice for a woman to participate, but she has so many constraints in the household. There is no time, she cannot actually balance those things and go to participate, and it also depends upon whether she has a say in the decision making in the community, which the country promotes, actually, which the government promotes, that women should have a say in the decision making because we have such proactive legislations for them. But is the community, is the family, is the cultural practice really able to understand these legislations, really able to send their women, or really the women realize, or women build their agencies, enough agency that they say that, see, the country has this for me, I am going to participate, I am going to be there in grassroots democracy. So are they, we have to see whether women have got that space,
Yes.
those cultural norms have been relaxed for her, and they have created a favorable environment to her to go and participate in grassroots democracy, and then maybe national level. So that becomes very important. I mean, there is lot of sensitization, lot of advocacy, lot of awareness required in that aspect, because we have good legislations, no doubt about that, but we need advocacy, we need sensitization to make people understand and overcome the cultural barriers.
Yeah, in there are many cases where the girls are in the power, but their husband, they go for they do the things for them. So now it is very essential that we should have sensitization, and we should have a strong policy framework for them, so that we can empower these women in politics also.
True, true.
Yeah, but how you feel gender equality can be achieved?
This is a very challenging question actually, how gender equality can be achieved. Gender equality can only be achieved when we tie hands with each other actually. It is not the government who has taken the sole responsibility of formulating policies and legislation, and henceforth gender equality is achieved. Or we say the sustainable development goals, which we are talking about after the Millennium Development Goals, where gender seems to be a prime important goal, an important goal to be achieved. We cannot say that all these things will contribute to achieving gender equality wholeheartedly, I mean solely. They will definitely contribute to achieving gender equality, no doubt about that, but provided we have lot of sensitization, we have lot of institutional practices getting relaxed. These institutional practices which are which actually are talking about patriarchal structures, gendered norms, that needs to be questioned, that needs to be relaxed, so that women can achieve gender equality. Suppose, as you were saying rightly, that if we have a good policy, we need to have sensitization on that policy. Government has so many schemes, Beti Bachao, so many schemes these days, and a lot of schemes in the past, so many schemes for education, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, universal primary education for girl children, NIOS, so many things which is happening in the country which will empower the girl children, but that empowerment does not mean that only governmental policies will exactly help them to empower unless the mindsets are changed, because governmental policies can only help. It's a step towards empowerment, definitely a very positive step towards empowerment, but it also needs a lot of sensitization at the community level, at the local level, for people to understand the ethos behind these government policies, the positive mindsets behind these government policies, and how these policies will actually contribute in empowering the women folk of the country. So gender equality remains a challenging task, and it definitely can be achieved when the government, when the local agencies, when the NGOs, when the civil society organizations, when the trade unions, when people, gender rights activists, so many people join, educationists, scholars, so many people join hands together and take a pledge that we all will work together towards gender equality. Then only it can be achieved.
Yeah, thank you. Can you discuss what is feminism and what is their contribution?
Feminism is both a concept and a practice, definitely, and it is advocacy for equal rights for men and women both. And feminism started with feminist movements in the West, and where many feminist scholars, they talked about equal rights for both men and women. And feminism has one immense contribution towards achieving gender equality. There are different stages, different phases of feminism, where different feminist scholars, Mary Wollstonecraft, Betty Friedan, Shulamit Firestone, these are different feminist scholars who contributed a lot towards achieving gender equality in different feminist movements. They have fought for equality of sexes, equality between men and women. They have fought for bringing household into the forefront, bringing household gender relations, unequal gender relations into the forefront, and identifying the unequal practices which are there in the household. So and now presently feminism has moved on much ahead, and it talks about different kinds of feminisms, different situatedness of women, where women across different local cultures, across diverse cultures are situatedness, and we need to understand their situatedness to understand their conditions. so that we can think about improving their conditions. So feminism has definitely immensely contributed in empowerment of women.
So dear learners, throughout the lesson we have learned what is gender and what is sex. Gender is a social construct while sex is a biological construct. Although there is, our constitution says that there is no gender discrimination, but you see gender discrimination exists in family, society and our educational institutions. So we all have to enact how this gender discrimination can be eradicated. So I thank our expert Dr. Elena for coming to studio, and I also thank all of you for a patient listening. Thank you, learners.
Thank you.